You're listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles.
Let me read to you Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. As always, it will be on the screen behind me. There is a red pew Bible in front of you if you'd like to follow along, and you'll find it on page 871. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" This is the word of the Lord. The middle part of the book of Luke, which is where we find ourselves in the series we're in, is all about Jesus on the road with his disciples, teaching people what it looks like to follow him. What does it mean to be a disciple? And one of the major themes is money. And today, that can be inconvenient because for modern people, for people in the city, it's impolite to pry about money. It's a topic that we'd sort of rather avoid. Most people don't, they'll tell you all sorts of things. It's a fascinating world. They'll tell you things that people in history would never share with another person, but you ask them how they spend their money and they clam up real quick. That's just not something you ask. People get anxious when you talk about money, and people get especially anxious when preachers talk about money. And so it's kind of a double whammy. It's the kind of thing that you're tempted as a pastor to avoid as a topic, but Jesus makes it very difficult to avoid because he just always talks about money. We've seen it so far in the book of Luke, and we're going to see it a lot more in this section. I haven't run the numbers on this, but I believe he talks about money more than he talks about any other single topic, especially in the Gospel of Luke. Now, in other words, you can't avoid it. You can't sidestep it. And the truth is, we shouldn't want to avoid it because the Bible says there will be no significant spiritual growth in your life until you put your money, how you think about it, how you use it, into God's own hands. In other words, if I came to you and I said, "I love you with my whole life, but please don't ever ask me what happens to my money. Don't ever ask me for it, and don't ever ask me for any of my possessions," you would sort of look at me and say, "Well, I'm not sure how deep your love goes." Our money shows you what you value. It shows you where your priorities are. To say you can have all of me but my money is to say you can have some of me, and most of that's lip service. Or put it this way, if you went to a doctor and you said, "Doc, I'm tired all the time. I feel like I'm getting sick all the time. I don't sleep very well. I'm very restless." And the doc says, "All right, well, who knows what that is? Let's run some tests." And you say, "Hold on. You can check my lungs and my pancreas, but that's it. Like, you cannot touch my cardiovascular system. That's off the table." Now, at some point, what's the doctor going to say? You say, "Well, I have no ability to really cure you until I can look at all of you. Until I can see all of you, I can't really do anything to move you towards a cure." Now, God is saying in the Bible, unless you're willing to open up everything to me, including your money, I'm not really going to be able to bring any real change, substantive change into your life. And so we need Jesus to talk to us about our money. And we get it today, at least some of it, in the middle of the passage. Kind of the main verse here is what Jesus says, "Be on your guard against all covetousness. And you say, yes, covetousness, that word I use daily. Really, here's what it means. Watch out for greed. Covetousness is greed in the heart that injects envy into your life. Watch out for these things. He says it's like a spiritual disease. And what he shows us here is the danger of that disease and the nature of it and the prescription for it. And that's what we'll look at. Now, the danger of that disease, the passage starts with a fight over inheritance. This man basically interrupts Jesus and says, teacher, make my older brother share the inheritance with me. Here's what's happening. Back then, if a father died without a will, or sometimes with a will, this would happen, the older brother got the entire estate. And they had to sign off on any distributions that would go to the siblings. And so here's this man saying, Jesus, make my brother share the inheritance with me. Make him give me some of the estate. And Jesus says, who made me a judge over you? Now, we'll come back to this, but one of the things he's saying is, those things are important. It's not as though property disputes aren't important. But Jesus has a job description. He has limited time. And so he cannot spend his time settling property disputes, inheritance disputes. He's after bigger game. And you see that when he tells everyone, be on your guard against all covetousness. Now, this family is being torn apart by greed, by envy, by desire for more. And Jesus says, notice, not just to the brother. He doesn't go tell your older brother to not be covetous. Jesus said to them, to the disciples, to the crowd, to the younger brother, be careful of coveting. Therefore, this is a danger for everyone. And those words are specific words. Take care is literally the word see. See, covetousness, all kinds. And then, it says be on your guard. That means be on the lookout. See. So there's just two ways of saying this is something you can easily miss. That's the danger. The danger is covetousness is the kind of sin that hides from you. In other words, the Bible doesn't say things like, be on the lookout for theft. And it's not because theft is somehow less important than coveting. It's because mainly when you steal something, you almost always know that you're doing it. It's not an excuse to say, how did that candy bar get in my pocket? I'm sorry, officer. At some level, you knew what you were doing. But coveting, greed, envy, these are the kind of things that hide themselves. You don't know they're happening. This is the kind of sickness you might not know you have. Those are the worst diseases, are the kinds you don't know you have. Well, here's a spiritual disease that's dangerous because it hides itself from you. And you can kind of see that at some level in a few ways. One is this: greed is always easy to see in other people, and it is near impossible to see in yourself. You see this because, poor people think middle-class people are greedy, and middle-class people think rich people are greedy, and rich people think people who are richer than them are greedy, but no one thinks that they are greedy. And when Jesus tells this parable, notice, the problem is not the amount of money this guy has. The problem is the way he's thinking about it, the way he's handling it. Coveting doesn't happen once you hit a certain income level. It is possible to have money and not be greedy. And it is possible to be greedy and not have money. The disease can get into your life whether you have a ton of money, whether you have no money, or whether you're somewhere in between. And that means then, do you see, if that's the danger, it means that you and I should expect that this is a problem for us. It is not safe to assume this isn't an issue for you. Because look, when's the last time you thought, do I really need all this stuff? Do I really need this number in my bank account? We live in a world that is covered in coveting. The marketing, the influencing, the billboards, everything is saying, you know what you need is you need this one thing you don't have yet, and then things will be different for you. And it's so much a part of our lives that we barely notice it. You probably coveted on the way here this morning. At some level, people in the city, what did you do? You passed by a car and thought, you passed by an apartment that's bigger than 600 square feet. You thought, oh, that sign said 2-bedroom apartment. These things happen. They come along, and you find yourself, without even noticing it, there are plenty of ways. Look, there are plenty of ways money can make your life more convenient. But it is incredibly easy to let greed take over without you noticing it. It is incredibly easy to go from wouldn't it be nice if to I will only be happy if. It's very subtle, it hides, that's the danger. And so you need to be on your guard. You need to be a sentry. Good sentries, they don't wait till the enemy's at the gate to notice. They look out on the horizon, small motions, they're paying attention. What if that's something wrong? You got to do the same thing in your life and in your heart. And let me just give you some symptoms to look for. One of them is exhaustion. You're always tired. Kelly Kapik is a theologian and a college professor, and he said, when I started teaching decades ago, I got a certain kind of student. I got freshmen, and what happened was they would come and they'd go, oh, this is college. I need to kind of take a little more on. I need to work a little harder. I need to it's going to add some stress to my life, but I'm really going to push through. He says, now I get 18-year-olds that are already burnt out. They're already overstressed because they've been sold the idea of the American dream and that they have to get the good grades in high school and the right extracurriculars and write the right personal narrative statement and get the right test scores so they can get into the right school, and that right school can get them to the right internship where they perform the right way and get to the right job where they can get the right salary and move up the right kind of ladder. At some level, he's getting kids that are already exhausted, they're 18. And he said, because it's a kind of greed. It's not that they necessarily adopted it themselves. It was just handed to them. But they find themselves in a place where they have to work so hard because they have been told they will only be satisfied if they follow that track. There will be no happy life if they don't get that next rung on the ladder. Sometimes you're just tired, but sometimes you're exhausted because greed has gotten a hold of your life. Coveting has gotten a hold of you, and it's making you tired. You're always tired because you're always got to work because you'll never be satisfied until you get something else. That's one way you're exhausted. Another way is bitterness. You're never grateful. One of the things about the passage is that it goes out of its way to say the land produced plentifully, which is a sort of indirect way of saying this guy, in agriculture, you can keep something from growing, but you can't make something grow. God gives the growth. And so what you have is this guy in a situation where what he has is something God gave him. In fact, later on, it says his soul was required of him. That's fancy language for saying his soul was on loan from God, and God called in the loan. And so everything in this guy's life has been given to him, and yet what's his little soliloquy in the middle? It is all personal pronouns. It is only what is his and about my land, my crop, my produce. See, if you're never grateful, it's a sign, it's a symptom. Look, what is the ratio between your thoughts about what you already have and your thoughts about what you wish you had? What's the percentage? What's the number? What's the ratio there? See, it could be a symptom. There's a bitterness. There's a lack of gratitude. I'll give you a couple more. Anxiety is one. You're always worried. So you're exhausted, you're always tired. You're bitter, you're never grateful. And you're anxious, you're always worried. And this is next week in some ways, we'll go into it in detail, but even in this passage, Jesus is talking to the disciples. They're not very rich. The crowd is made up of people who are almost certainly not very rich. The younger brother's there because he doesn't have the inheritance. He's talking to people who don't have a lot of money to hoard. What's going to be the way that their coveting expresses itself? Well, he talks about it next week. They're going to get anxious. They're going to get worried. Does the subject of money make you anxious? You can have it and not have it. It can make you anxious. Everyone at some point has to think about money, but is it the natural pattern of your heart to worry about it? That's a symptom. It could be that greed is getting into your heart. You don't realize it. Last one, you're discontent. You're always comparing. There's a great passage at the end of the Gospel of John where Peter's talking to Jesus, and Jesus basically tells him, you're going to die young, and you're going to die in a way you're not going to like. And John is right there, the other disciple, and Peter looks at John and says, what about him? And Jesus says to him, what's that to you? You follow me. Now, we are constantly looking at other people's lives, people that have things we don't have, and we say, what about them? And Jesus' answer is always, what's that to you? You follow me. And the thing is, now, look, if you look at other people, the way Peter's looking at John, you're going to end up discontent. A lot of us just assume discontentment is normal and natural. We do it so much, we don't even know we're doing it. And so we always need to hear Jesus saying that. We always need to hear him saying, what's that to you? Don't pay attention to them. You follow me. And if you just refuse to hear him say that to you, if you cannot stop comparing, it's a symptom. There's a sense that this disease might have gotten into your heart. You see, it hides itself, but it's there. And look, let me tell you something briefly. Don't trust yourself to evaluate yourself, even on these criteria. You need other people for this. You need community for this. You don't see it. If it hides, you're going to need help to see it. Even doctors are supposed to go to other doctors to get physicals. They know all the information. They're supposed to go to somebody else to tell them what's going on inside of them. How much more do you and I need to go to other people, trusted people, and open up our financial lives and say, help me see where this might be hiding. Help me see where greed might have gotten a hold of me. It's risky, but it's true. And if you start looking, you're going to realize a lot of us, we have a problem. And a lot of us who thought we had a small problem, now we realize it's bigger than we thought. The coveting you see in your life is the tip of a very large iceberg. That's the danger. It's under the surface. Now, that's the danger. What's the nature? Because an illness, it always goes to work in your body to produce, the nature of the illness produces certain ill effects in you. And so here's greed. How does that go to work in your life? What does it produce? Well, the passage says it makes you a fool. God very rarely directly calls someone a fool in the Bible, but you have it here. You fool, In the Bible, there's a lot of ways to talk about foolishness, but one way, the characteristics of foolishness are along these lines. A fool, you focus only on yourself, you focus only on this life, and despite that, you never actually find any satisfaction. You focus only on yourself, focus only on this life, and despite that, you never actually find any satisfaction. That's foolishness. And that's what you see happening in this parable. Greed made this guy a fool. And the warning is, if you're not on your guard, it will do the same thing in your life. Now what does it look like? You look at the parable, we'll see. On the one hand, foolishness looks like focusing only on yourself. And you see in the middle of the parable, that guy says, I, my, me. Over and over again, there's not a mention of God. There's not a mention of anyone else. The only thing he sees is him and his money, him and his stuff. And there's a kind of eye disease where you slowly lose your peripheral vision, and eventually the only thing you can see is just one thing in one little point right in front of you. And what greed does in making you a fool is it does that to your soul. It slowly narrows your world until all you see is you and your wealth. This is Dickens. This is Ebenezer Scrooge. And you might not have read that, but you probably are familiar with Scrooge McDuck. And the Disney adaptation is a decent one. And what's the problem? He's a miser. All he can see is him and his money, but that's not actually the thing that the book is about. It's not really what the movie's about either. The thing that's about is how it narrows him down, and it means he no longer can enjoy any of the beautiful things in life because he can't see them. And so you see, where do the ghosts take him? They take him to see the warm family dinners that he can't be a part of. He's always on the outside looking in. They take him to see the relationship they left behind for his money. They take him to see the parties, the beautiful things in the world that he simply cannot enjoy because his whole field of vision narrowed down to one point. It was him and his money. Now, you might not be Scrooge, but greed will do this to you. You will sacrifice things that are beautiful and good and the richest parts of life for money. Your whole life will contract until all you see is you and your money. And there's a reality that if greed is operative in your heart, and it's probably operative in all our hearts at this moment, that means that we are already at some level missing out on the beauties of life right now because of the way we think about money and possessions and what we wish we had. There's greed at work in your heart. It makes you a fool. You miss the good things. You miss the riches for riches that you're trying to gain. You miss it. Now, that's one way, but then the other way, what do we say? It's a focus only on this life, a focus only on yourself, and a focus only on this life. Now, you see what he says. Basically, he says, now that I have this bumper crop, I'm set. I'll be good for years. I can retire early. Now, and at night, what happens? His soul's called in. At some level, everybody knows we're going to die. And yet, so few people let that be a factor in almost any of their decisions. least of all, financial decisions. John Calvin said, everybody knows they're going to die. He says, but there is hardly any subject we remember less. We undertake everything as if we were establishing immortality for ourselves on earth. He says, actually, every once in a while you go to a funeral and you start to philosophize. Oh, life is a vapor. Life is so fleeting. It's so short. And then he says, and that fades like applause after a show at a theater. And you go right back to forgetting all about it and living your life as though this is all there is. And that's what this guy's doing, and it's foolishness. In the world of investment, there are things called bubbles. When a particular asset gets so popular that its price rises well above its value. I lived through one. It was the Beanie Baby bubble. Some of you remember this? These little plush toys cost like $5, and they were cute. They got incredibly popular, and people started to think, these are going to get rare, and if I have some, it's a beautiful investment. So they paid thousands, some people, of dollars for like rare Beanie Babies. And, of course, eventually people realized Beanie Babies aren't worth thousands of dollars, and the value just plummeted. So people have these closets full of mint condition Beanie Babies that are worth nothing at this point. A financial writer said the Beanie Baby craze was perhaps the greatest market bubble of all time in terms of sheer mass insanity. That tracks for me. Every bubble pops and the value plummets. But see, look, do you understand what this parable is saying? Every possession you have, every dollar in your bank account, it's a Beanie Baby. One day the bubble will pop and the value will plummet to zero. When life is over, it will not matter how much you have. It will only matter what you did with it. The value will go to zero of everything in your life. And therefore, do you see, greed is far more mass insanity than Beanie Babies. It makes you forget to consider things past this life. It makes you a fool. You focus only on yourself. You focus only on this life. But, despite all that, you still get no satisfaction. Here this guy says, here's what's now that I have this bumper crop, I will relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, there's something subtle here, but it's very important to notice, and that's this. He was rich already. So he had barns. They were so full, he had to tear them down to build bigger barns to hold this crop. Now, he says, I can finally relax. I can finally enjoy my life. I wonder what he said when he had medium-sized barns and tore them down to build bigger ones. Do you see, there's a cycle built into this parable. He already had big barns. That didn't do it. But now bigger barns, now I can relax. Now I can enjoy my life. Greed is an endless cycle of desire, and it destroys your ability to enjoy anything, to have any deep happiness in your life. For example, some people are in incredible physical shape, and they look in the mirror, and all they see are flaws. Well, here's this guy. He's in incredible financial shape. But all he sees is lack. All he sees is what he doesn't have. He can't rest. He can't see his own wealth. All he can see is it's not enough. Now that's what greed does. It keeps moving the goalposts. Coveting will always push them back on you. We always think, all of us in this city, another bedroom, that will do it. Give me another bedroom and I'll finally be satisfied. Another 10% annually, and that will satisfy me. And the thing is, you get it, and it brings some satisfaction. Oh, but not nearly what you thought it would. And for some reason, no matter how long you live, it becomes incredibly difficult to not say, but the next bedroom, that will do it. This is John Rockefeller, richest man in the world. Someone came to him and said, how much is enough? And he said, just a little bit more. Or, a little more modern, Don Draper. I can't recommend you watch Mad Men, but he said, what's happiness? Happiness, he said, is the moment before you need more happiness. Now look, how many people in our city are working hard and they have things in their life. They're further along, they've seen some benefit of it, and they can enjoy none of it. They have no real joy in their life because the greed has eaten it up. That's what greed does. It makes you into a miser. You'll never find any real satisfaction, no matter how much you get. You're never going to enjoy anything. No matter what comes into your life, coveting will eat the joy of it because it will only look for more. And so you see, it makes you into a fool. Now, I'm going to give you one more way that makes you a fool. And here's what it is. Jesus says, be on your guard against all coveting, because life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Now, what that means is that coveting or greed is a way of looking for your life in what you own. And the word here that's used for life is not biological life, not staying alive. It's abundance of life. It's transcendent life. And so what's happening is you're finding your security, your status, your wealth in your stuff, in your bank account, in your investments, in what it can purchase for you. And it can look different from person to person. And in fact, both people judge each other because it can give you a life because it gives you control or because it gives you comfort. In the parable, it's all control. Notice he's saying deep in his soul, my soul, here's how to have control in an uncontrollable world. I will have enough things. I will have enough investments. It'll last me a long time. He made the money, he made the security, he made the money his security. And that's a lie. Only God can give you that kind of security. And we know this. At some level, what are the hardest things in life? What are the things you're really trying to get security from? It's tragedies, it's broken relationships, it's suffering, it's grief, it's death. Money can do nothing to help you with those things. It has no ability to give you any control over any of that. It's a lie. Having a lot of money, don't get me wrong, it is convenient. It can solve some problems, but it does nothing for the things that make life really hard. And on the other side, there's control. On the other side, there's comfort. Some people, they're not looking for security from them having the money, they're looking from comfort from using the money. This gets you clothes, it gets you cars, it gets you food, it gets you the right lifestyle, And so what do you have? Two kinds of people who are building their life. You have savers who control and spenders who love comfort, and they both judge each other. They both think the other one's greedy. Look at those people in their fancy cars. or look at those misers hoarding up all their money. Don't you think maybe you're someone who looks at all the people who have all these savings, all these investments, and say, look at those greedy people. Maybe you're the person who it's a point of pride that you drive that 2008 Prius. It's a point of pride that you have that studio apartment that's rent control. Those other people are all just greedy. Don't you see? You're both looking for a life. You're both looking for abundance from these things. When you do that, and your soul is required of you, you don't just lose your physical life, you lose everything that made life worth living along with it, because you put your life in things that are going to plummet to zero. And so God calls this guy a fool. That's the nature of this disease. He was blinded by greed, so he only thought of himself, he only thought of this life, and despite it all, he found no satisfaction, and he looked for a life that he couldn't get out of what he had. And you say, and I say, we all say here, I'm not that bad. And Jesus says, not yet. But if this has a hold in your heart, especially if you don't see it, don't delude yourself into thinking it can't get there. And it can't hollow you out and make you into a miser with no joy and only craving. So what do you do? What's the prescription? Now, in Lewis's books, Chronicles of Narnia, the kids' fiction, there's a guy, one of the great opening lines in one of the books is there was a kid named Eustace Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Because he was just a bitter, envious, greedy kid who always wanted more than the person next to him and always thought he was very resentful. And he ends up on this adventure with his relatives in the land of Narnia, and he's just doing it there. He's just full of bitterness, always trying to have a little more than the person next to them and take a little more and think that people are taking from him. And eventually he finds himself in this cave and he stumbles across a dragon's hoard of gold. And he says, finally I have what's mine. I have what was always coming to me. And I'll show them. And he falls asleep dreaming greedy dreams. And he wakes up and he finds out he's actually turned into a dragon. He was already dragonish on the inside. Now his outsides reflect the insides. The greed got to him. The greed took him over. And at the beginning, that's exhilarating. He can fly. He's very strong. But immediately he realizes, I'm completely isolated. I'm completely alone. Because if anyone looks at me, any of my old friends, any of my relatives, they're going to be so frightened. They'll never know it's me. And so he starts to try and claw his skin off, see if there's still a boy inside somewhere. And he just can't do it. He keeps taking layer and layer of skin off, and he's still the dragon, and it hurts. And so what has to happen is Aslan, the lion, the Christ figure in the story, comes in, his claws are sharper, his claws go deeper, and he has to get his claws into him. And it says that it hurt so bad he thought he was losing his very self. But he comes out, and it's him again. He's who he's born to be. He's who he's built to be. Now look, what's the lesson there? Is that greed gets into your heart, and therefore the answer has to get into your heart. You need claws in you if you're going to get this out. You can't just start giving money away. It won't work. It's papering over the problem. You can't do it from the outside in. It has to happen from the inside out. You need claws in you. You need that prescription. Now, in the text, you get it. Because the two things the text gives you for prescription, be wise and be rich. Be wise in the sense that don't be a fool means be wise, have wisdom. But then it says, don't lay up treasures for yourself, but be rich toward God. Be wise, be rich. Now, be wise, well, on the one hand, that means don't be foolish. Don't forget about eternity. Don't forget about the people in your life. Don't forget you can only find a self in God. But Proverbs says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And you actually see that in the passage. When Jesus says, man, who made me a judge over you? It's kind of strange because everywhere else Jesus is saying he is the judge, like all the time. He always talks about it. I'm going to judge the sheep and the goats. I'm going to judge heaven and earth. I'm the cosmic judge coming on the clouds. He's always saying he's the judge, and here he says he's not. What's going on? Well, the man comes and basically looks at Jesus, and notice he does not say, Jesus, come, hear my case, hear my brother's side, render an equitable decision. He says, Jesus, come tell him to give me the inheritance, which means, you know what that man fears? He fears money. That's the biggest gravitational pull in his life. That's what he fears. And he comes to Jesus to get what he really fears. And so when Jesus says he's not the judge, it's a way of him saying, I'm not the judge who's here to get you something nice that you want. I'm the judge who's here to get you. When you're wise, you come to Jesus not to claw something you want to yourself using him. When you're wise, you come to Jesus and say, I want you to put your claws into me. We're all the dragon. We all have the greed in our heart. And so long as what you really fear is money, so long as that's got a hold of you, you need Jesus not to get you more of what's killing you. You need him to get his claws in you so he can cure you. Jesus is not a means to your end. He's here to take your whole life. And until you come to Jesus and say, I'm here for you, no matter how big my apartment is, no matter what number is in my bank account, I'm yours apart from all of that. Until you do that, you'll never really be free from this. You'll never be wise. Fear the Lord. Come to Jesus. Come to Jesus and say, get your claws in me. That's the beginning of wisdom. That's where it starts. I'm giving you my whole life. Whatever you do with it, that's the beginning, but that's not where it ends. Because see, how can you trust that when he puts his claws in you, he won't tear you to pieces? And the key is in that phrase, be rich towards God. Now, that's a weird one because God owns the universe. How do you be rich towards him? What do you give the guy who has literally everything? He's actually given you everything you have. Oh, but here's the beginning of the trail that shows you. In 1 Chronicles, one of the kings in the Old Testament is dedicating something to the Lord. And he says in his prayer, everything comes from you. We've only given you what has come from your hand. See, the Bible says that even when God gives you something, he doesn't relinquish his ownership of it. It's still his. And therefore, you and I relate to money not like an owner, but like a manager, like a broker, like a steward. More wealth given you to manage is a wonderful thing, but you must never make the mistake of starting to believe that money is yours to do with as you see fit. You have to direct that money as a manager, as a broker, in line with the values and priorities of the investor. If you don't do that, you are committing a crime. And God, of course, is like the creator of everything, which means everything in your life is his, and you've been given whatever you have right now to manage. And you must do it in line with the values and the priorities of God, who's the rightful owner of all that you have. Now, what Are those values and priorities? He loves the poor. He loves generosity and hospitality. He loves when his church bears one another's burdens and goes out into the world and demonstrates his love for people, not just with words, but with finances, with possessions. And to deny that, to take those resources and use them as if they were your own, throw some money to charity and spend the rest on yourself, that's cosmic fraud. It's not just excessive, it's theft, it's evil. And yet that's what we've done. We have not been rich towards him. He's been so rich towards us, and we've squandered it. We've squandered it on ourselves. And so you see, how can you be rich towards God? How in the world can you do it? God decided to keep giving. Because in Jesus, God gives you the greatest treasure that allows you to be generous with everything else. You know, in 2 Corinthians 8, Paul is telling people without a lot of money to give money to people who have even less money than they do. He does not say, just do it, be a good person, stop hoarding your money, just give it away. He says this, he says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. He says, look, you're never going to be free with your earthly treasure until you see that God has given you his heavenly treasure. The Father treasures nothing more than the Son. And therefore, do you see, if he gives the Son to you, that means he treasures you. And on the cross, Jesus does exactly what he's asking us to do. He gives up his glory. He sells off his power. He lays it all aside. Everything. For us who were poor, who had nothing, who squandered the wealth he gave us already. Why? To pay for our sins. To make us right again with him. And if you know that you have been treasured by Jesus, that he was willing to give up everything, to pay anything for you. If you knew that, you would have a deep sense of interior wealth. And what that would allow you to do is look at everything else in your life. It would finally just be money. It would just be stuff. It wouldn't be life. It wouldn't be hope. It wouldn't be satisfaction, because you have a deep interior wealth in God giving his treasure, Jesus Christ, to you and making you his treasure. Every other treasure that you put at the center of your life will kill you as you try and purchase it, except for Jesus Christ. Only he is the treasure who dies for you so you can have him. Make him your treasure, and it'll cure you. His claws will go in you. It might hurt, but it'll cure you of this disease. And now look, we're out of time, but let me tell you this. That means then, out in the world, Christian, well, look, if you're not a Christian, do you have that kind of fortitude? Do you have that kind of interior wealth? You can. He's the only one who will die for you so you can have him. Everything else will make you die for it, and it will never actually give itself to you. Do you have anything like that in your life? If you do, you're not just set for a moment, but for eternity. But now, for those of you who are, let me tell you this. You're going to go back out into the world, and you're going to see bigger apartments. You're going to see better cars. You're going to see all sorts of things. The envy is going to come strong. And I tell you, in that moment, you're going to see things on Instagram. Some of you need to get off of Instagram. That's a different sermon. I just don't. But you're going to see stuff no matter what you do. Your heart's going to call out. And what you need to say is not, stop it. Don't look. What you need to say is, I have a far better treasure already. And therefore, whatever I'm looking at, it might be nice. It might be very convenient. It might even solve some problems for me, but it's just stuff. And you'll be free.
Thank you for listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles. For more information, please visit us on the web at cornerstonewla.org.